Hi, my name is Shania.
And my name is Jaden.
Welcome to the Ivory Tower, where our motto is for the culture, by the credits.
On this show, we talk about our thoughts on the current condition of academia, college life, and other stuff.
And we do it all from minority perspectives and voices we don't often get to hear from.
Let's get to it. Today's hot topic is Diaspora Wars.
And joining us on the show to help us talk about it is Mark Anthony, a rising first year at Virginia Tech. So, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. Just going through the days.
So, what's been going on with summer, like preparing for college-wise?
Man, it's been a lot. Like, I got my fam moving down to Florida like first week of August. I've got Junior Olympics with track throughout this whole summer. That's happening the same time they're moving. And then really just like finalizing and like figure out whatever like dates, all that kind of stuff that I need to know.
That's like a lot. What about you, Shania? Like anything going on?
Well, I just had to go get a vaccine, so that wasn't fun because I'm afraid.
The immunization records.
Yeah,
stuff.
it was like the meningococcal like B.
Oh, yeah.
It hurt. It did not feel good. So just coming off of that, pretty much, yeah.
I have to actually go do that soon because like the doctors just called me and were like, "We need your form still." I was like, "Oh, okay." Today we're talking about diaspora wars, the African diaspora in America, the disambiguations that typically arise from that, like Black American, Black African, those kind of things.
Mark, can you kick us off with talking about what it's like being Caribbean American, like within the African diaspora? Do you ever feel you are outside of that kind of conversation?
From like a bigger picture perspective, I would say like not really, because at the end of the day, we as a community, we're all going to get treated the same because we all look the same, quote unquote. But when it comes to more like smaller groups and stuff like that, for instance, even when we went to that 4th of July thing, and there's that song that was playing, that you said this gets played at like every Black cookout, like everybody should know this. Being Caribbean American, I don't go to Black cookouts, I go to Caribbean cookouts. So I had no idea what that. I still don't know what that song is, right? When it comes to stuff like that, like a lot of like the music that I listen to, the way that I was raised, the way that my family talks around the house, stuff like that. When I moved to South Florida, that was like the biggest eye opener for me. My dad being Coast Guard, we moved around a little bit. Before I was in South Florida, I was in South Texas, right? So I went from being one of the only like Black kids in my class for 3 years to being one of many. Coming into like South Florida, being not only just Caribbean American, so I mean, I wasn't really too in tune with, I'll say Black culture per se. I was also raised in a very PWI like area. When I got to South Florida and I didn't know who Kodak Black was, it was a huge learning curve for me on the football field, especially because that's where I first learned what code switching was and like how to do it. Because everyone in South Florida, they all have like a certain kind of like accent, at least down in like the Broward County area. They all have that certain kind of accent, that certain kind of dialect, certain kind of just the AAV in general, right? I didn't know any of that, right? There's times where I actually couldn't understand what any of my teammates were saying sometimes just because of the accents. Being around them for long enough, I eventually was able to start incorporating language into my own vocabulary. But then when I'd get home and I'd be around my mom would be like, why are you talking like that? Like, what are you doing? kind of get like mixed in between the two the longer you're around two different environments.
Do you feel like your Blackness was questioned, or have you ever felt like your Blackness has been questioned?
Oh, 100%. As I said, being in Texas before, being around a bunch of white folk, I come to South Florida. I get into middle school, everyone's been around each other for a while now. Everybody's been living in South Florida for some time. I'm new. There's a time, I had a friend, her name was Brianna. I was walking with her one time to class and she stops me and goes, you don't act Black. And I'm just like, I wanted to say that like, I kind of knew what she meant, but just the implications around it were just all wrong. I don't know. I didn't really talk with AAV like that. I wasn't like going out partying or like anything like that. Whatever she might have thought acting Black was, I wasn't doing it, right? So, I mean, after that, me and her weren't friends. But no, that was a question before. And there was times where like when I was first learning how to code switch or whatever, I'd have to figure out when it was applicable and when it was not. Times where I'd be like out in public and then I might like say something that's a little more on the AAV side. I'm like, ooh, wait, that's like not the setting, not the setting. There's definitely times where like my blackness was definitely put on trial. I'll say that.
I'm trying.
Hmm.
Jaden, what about you?
Yeah. So I mentioned this in like the previous episode. My mom's she's from Nigeria, we're Nigerian, but then my dad's family is from Mississippi. So it's like very two-sided in that sense of like the black culture. And I mean, I've never been questioned in the sense of like, oh, you're not black, like literally, like obviously, but in a cultural sense, and more so for me with respect to African culture, I've always been struggling with fitting into that community or like being black enough in that respect. When I'm with other like Nigerians or with other Africans, West Africans, my ability to be truly African tends to be questioned or it feels like it is. I'll be talking to African or West African friends and it's like almost like step by step procedure. Like they find out like I'm Nigerian and then there's that initial happiness or sense of community that you feel. But then when like they find out I'm only half or they find out like, oh yeah, I'm raised in the States or I don't speak the language as well. I almost have to prove that you can still fit into that community. And it makes me feel I like lied initially, which makes me feel bad, but then I feel bad that I feel bad because at the end of the day, I'm still Nigerian, right? Definitely less so on the African American side. There's been problems with it, but
Hmm.
in general, I've always felt like I had to either hide the fact that I'm African or be ready to defend it. I would definitely agree with what Mark was saying about learning how to code switch when you're in front of non-black people. I was born in New Mexico, but we lived in Texas for 5 years and then we moved here. And I would say moving to Northern Virginia, surprisingly, there was a lot less black people initially in elementary school and like adjusting to that environment. I would say learning how to code switch, learning like how to say certain things in certain environments, how not to say certain things in other environments was definitely a struggle. I definitely have to get around that. Sure.
Yeah, I think that what's most interesting for me in my family, AAVE is more so will happen every now and then. Like it's not the common way that we speak. And the reason for that is because my family is very deep south country. So it's almost like a different kind of sociolinguistics dialect there. It's not what you typically would see on TV or with other people. It's a very specific way that my family speaks. I never kind of had that situation where I had to learn how to code switch into AAVE, but I did feel questioned at one point, especially in middle school, because as I previously mentioned in the last episode, that was when I finally saw more people who looked like me was in middle school, because in my elementary school that was not the case. And it was interesting because I got it on both sides. I got it on both the non-black side and on the black side of being like, you're not black enough. I don't even know how to describe it. It was more so on the African American side of things. A lot of my peers spoke solely in AAVE. Like that was just the normal way of speaking, but I did not speak that way. So they would say, "Oh, why are you like almost was like calling me whitewash, calling me an Oreo, et cetera, et cetera." And
Mm.
then on the white side of things, it was the expectation, "Oh, you should be speaking like everybody else, or you should be acting in this stereotype that we have of your community." I felt almost pulled in all directions because I didn't know where I was supposed to land, or I didn't know
Mm.
how was I supposed to be acting, because two different sides of this coin expect me to act a certain way, but that's the way I've never acted before.
Choosing not to speak in AV. Do
Hmm.
you think that being around non-black peers versus black peers, did you ever feel like you could identify more with one group when that was still going on? Not like you didn't belong in the black community, but did you feel at times that it was easier to talk to one group over the other in certain circumstances?
That is a very interesting question. I almost felt like I didn't really belong on either side, which I think is something
Hmm.
that a lot of people, especially a lot of African American kids who grew up in suburbia, can relate to where it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you have to add on things or take away things or shift the way you are a little bit with everybody, right? Because you are trying to fit into the box or fit into the mold of what they expect you to be like when communicating with them. Yeah, I would say that I never necessarily felt like I was more comfortable. Obviously, I felt a little bit more comfortable with my African American peers, but it was never like, oh, I feel at home in middle school. Now, I don't feel that way anymore. I definitely feel more accepted for who I am without
Hmm.
having to be that chameleon, without having to code switch
Right.
and things like that. Mark, what about you?
I was really just a product of my environment. Being in, I mean, I definitely just felt more accepted by my non-African American peers solely for the fact that I just didn't have a lot of African American peers in Texas. When I went to Florida, it really just depended on where I was. Like at school, I definitely definitely gravitated more towards my non-African American peers. But then when I was on the football field, I was just like the rest of them. I'm a pretty sociable person. It's not hard for me to take a grasp of my environment and
Mhm.
then piggyback off of that. If there was a time though where both of those groups were mixed together at the same time, I wouldn't really know what to do. I'd be like, I wouldn't really know what to do. But when it's like when there's separate environments like that, it was pretty easy for me to still feel accepted within those groups. But the confliction with that is it's almost as if there's not just one me. It's almost as if there's multiple me spread out between different groups of people. So, like in hindsight, I can't necessarily call that acceptance, but at the time, I never really felt like I was left out.
Do you feel that the African diaspora should be more unified, or what things do you all think we should start striving towards within the Black community in America?
I think a pretty big issue would definitely be colorism, like just within our community as a whole. We all need to be able to like understand that no matter how different we may be, we are one and the same. We'll still be looked at as one and the same by the rest of the world. So this division within so many different communities will it will only tear us down.
I definitely agree with that. I think, as a people, like Mark said, we need to be more unified. When people talk about Black unity, like among the diaspora, I think a lot of times it's misinterpreted like, oh, you want us to fit into Black American culture so much, like you want to get rid of the African culture. And I've heard a lot of people like tell me that personally. I just don't want to associate with them because there's a them now, right? But I'm not saying that Black unity is something that shames African culture. It's not something that would deteriorate that or minimize that in any sense. It's just supposed to show that no matter if you're African or you're Black American, whatever, in this country, you are Black America. Like this, like that's all that's being represented by you. Like, and like what Mark was saying, people are going to perceive us the same way. If you see a Black kid walking down the street, the same assumption that some white dude watching us might have will be the same, no matter if you identify as African or African American. And in that sense, we all do have a unified culture. And without disregarding what makes us different, we should also recognize what makes us, the same.
Yeah, I think definitely there are unfortunately negative stereotypes that each side holds against each other and has acted on against each other, which I think is horrible. And for those reasons, I also believe that we should move towards a more unified state while also acknowledging the beauty in different people's cultures and the beauty in the differences within the Black diaspora. That's what makes it so diverse and so beautiful to look at from a whole, to be like, wow, coming from this continent, coming from the Caribbean, coming from the United States, there are so many different kinds of people and so many different stories about what it means to be Black, right? And I think just having that term in general, Black is just to describe a phenotype, right? We use Black, we use white, we use brown. Those things just describe our skin color. It has nothing to do with where you come from or where your family's from. And so I think that if both communities attempted to move away from holding such negative stereotypes, especially against like the African American community, there's a lot of, oh, they're lazy, or oh, they don't pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or they aren't trying to be better. Like that's something that I've heard from some African peers as well. But I think that we all need to take the time to take a step back and be like, hey, and that happens on both sides. The African American community has negative things that has been said about the African community at the same time. So taking a step back and realizing that, like Mark Anthony said, this hurts everybody at the end of the day. This helps no one. We're just pitting ourselves against each other more and more and not acknowledging the fact that, like you guys have said, at the end of the day, we all are one color and we all come from the same place. So
We talked about representation in terms of, oh, African culture, versus African American culture. When you look at media, like social media or TV or whatever, the perceptions of Black people seem to be either like identical across the board, or it's like perceiving us as this one stereotype. Like you'll see all the minorities rolled up into one character, or the term like magical Negro, like that character. Just have you heard of that?
no, I've never heard of that before. What?
I'm not hip to that.
Wait, okay, you need to give us a definition because what is that?
The magical Negro character is like the Black character who's just there to help the main character, who's typically like in this context, a white character or someone
Oh,
just,
okay. Yes, I
And I'm
know.
like, yeah, that
Yeah.
was
I've never heard that term before, but
really, oh, okay. Yeah.
no. What?
All that to say, the media in general seems to try to almost unify, kind of bad word for that, but like black culture into one distinct personality that's like, oh, okay, that's the black character. And
Mhm.
I think, while like maybe numerically the number of black actors or black representation have increased in media, or like at least the discussion of it in social media, I don't think that it adequately represents black culture as a whole. Like what we've talked about, there's so many sides to it. There's so many different ways to be black. And so my question, since we each kind of represent a different viewpoint on the black community, do you feel represented in your culture, like your specific facet of black culture within media, or within even just your communities? Like I know, Mark, you talked about football, and I know Shania, you're involved with many different groups. Like, do you feel represented in those communities or media in general?
To the media, I feel like the stereotypical Jamaican in the media, the same, literally everywhere. I In mainstream media, I don't think I've seen one like genuine, accurate representation of a Jamaican unless the movie is about Jamaicans. Like,
Mm.
for instance, that Bob Marley biopic. Like, obviously, that's going to be an accurate representation because it's about Bob Marley. Everyone in the movie is Jamaican, right?
Mhm.
But like, you pull up Shark Tales, you look at the jellyfish from Shark Tales. Yeah, you look at the Rasta jellyfish from Shark Tales. Every single Jamaican style character in mainstream media will be like them. I think across a lot of different kinds of ethnic groups and nationalities and whatnot, I feel like Jamaicans are definitely one of the most generalized because
Mm.
when you think of a Jamaican, the first thing you think is "Yeah, man." It's always that. It's always that. I would say in mainstream media, not really. Across like other forms of media, like reggae and dancehall, for whatever reason, has been on the come up again recently, which is always nice to see. I haven't really met anyone that has anything bad to say about like reggae.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like it's a pretty well accepted genre. Same with dancehall, although most people don't really know dancehall or don't know that a song is dancehall. So I'd say from that standpoint, yeah. But when it comes to like any kind of like form of picture media or even written media, nah. Jamaican characters, they get the short end of the stick a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that in more recent years, in the last decade or so, I think representation of African Americans. But I mean, the thing about that is, once again, you fall into that generalized term because you have people from the North, you have people from the South, you have people from the Midwest, people from the Far West. Like, it's impossible to just say yes or no to is there representation of African Americans. For example, like Sinners, when Sinners came out, that was really nice for me to watch because it was representation of Southern African American culture, which is something that I have been immersed in since birth. And seeing how accurately it was represented, obviously minus all the vampires and everything, seeing how accurately it was represented was really nice. I mean, going so far as to show sharecropping and showing how even though this was post emancipation, people were still tied to cotton picking and tied to the fields, even though we were supposedly free. And so, and you know, having sharecropping ancestors and people who have gone through those things, it was really nice to see that on screen and be portrayed both accurately and in a brighter light, because I think a lot of the times when there are movies that come out or when there are shows that come out about African Americans, I feel like it falls into one of two things. Typically, it's either, I don't want to say trauma farming, but it is very focused on slavery, Jim Crow era, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I think having news stories about African, for example, like Forever, that series was really nice to see because people can just exist as they are without it being the entire point of the show, or like the culture is there but it's not the headline of it, if that makes any sense. It's more
Right.
so, okay, this character just so happens to be black, rather than this show is about this character being black. And two things can be true at once. You can do that without necessarily having to induce trauma and all of those things that we've seen so often throughout the media. And then I think, unfortunately, on the other side of things have been, you know, reality TV shows like Baddies, Real Housewives. Like, I love Real Housewives of Atlanta as much as the next person, but I think those types of shows only hold us back in a sense because they're portraying us be, oh, we're always fighting, we're always like being quote unquote like ghetto or ratchet. And in situations such as those, and I think there's nothing wrong with having a diverse array of media to represent different aspects of African American culture, but I do think we should start heading towards making stories that just so happen to include African American culture and people rather than having it only be focused on that.
I wanted to talk about the perception of social media in general because I feel like since it's something so intertwined with our generation, Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, like whatever poison that we're all stuck in,
Right.
it seems like the world has gotten a lot more comfortable being racist on media through those channels, or at least saying things that would be privy to a lot of ignorance. I would go as far to say that that has affected how people socialize with each other in real life because you can just kind of comment whatever you want or hype it on a screen or just kind of say whatever. Like you have kids on social media throwing like hard R in like in the chat or whatever, or making some
Right.
really dumb race joke that just is completely unnecessary, but because it's under the guise of a joke or like hashtag humor, right? Or whatever, it's pops up on everyone's feed. And it's weird that it makes me feel weird for calling it out. Like I'm sure we've all been in those situations where it's like within the first 10 minutes of meeting someone who isn't black, they feel the need to make a race joke or something to ease the atmosphere or whatever. If you call them out for it, you're playing victim all of a sudden, or you're like, you're not being fun, or you need to be reminded that times have changed or whatever. And I think media has had like a crucial role in making people more comfortable. And I feel like if you need to make jokes to make yourself feel comfortable around a black person, you need to change the way you perceive our people.
I think definitely when it comes to the like hashtag dark humor situation, like that
Yeah.
has never made sense to me, in my opinion. Like I've never found it appealing at all. I think especially when people say, "Oh, that was like slavery was like hundreds of years ago. It's not that deep." In my mind, I'm like, Ruby Bridges is still alive. She has an Instagram account. Like there, it's not these things did not happen as far back as people think. And I don't know if that's due to the way that history books have created this perception that they happened hundreds of years ago. It has no effect on us today. I do think obviously there are things that are clearly are not the same as they were back then. But the sentiment of being like, oh, it's not that deep is something that I think is due to social media because social media desensitizes people. It desensitizes people from other people's feelings. It does it towards violence. For example, on Instagram Reels, right, you see somebody get hit by a car. Like, there's no type of censorship whatsoever. So you become accustomed to, oh, this is just another day on social media. Like, it's not that deep. I'm just going to keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, and not taking the time to sit down with yourself and being like, wow, even though I might not and I mean this goes for all races and all different ethnic groups, even if I might not personally connect with this or feel like I can relate to this or that it might not necessarily hurt or offend me, it could still hurt or offend other racial groups because I might not completely understand the culture, completely understand the history of how that hurt and pain is still present today.
There's some times where like dark humor done right, it actually can add some kind of ease to a situation because like making fun of a situation at times is often just like the best mechanism to cope with it. But there's just some times where like a joke is made and not only is it offensive, it's also just like not correct. Not even like
Yeah,
not even right.
yeah,
And then when you call it out, like what happened to humor? People can't accept dark humor anymore. Like
yeah.
it's like well, it wasn't humor. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. It wasn't correct. Like there's times say I'll be on the game, and you know how a party chat will get. Someone will say something that's just like it'll be wildly out of pocket. But since you're on the game, it's all like a fun atmosphere, whatever. You're not really like inclined to say anything about it. However, had the situation been different, if you're out in public and someone said the exact same thing, it would have been a whole different situation. Depending on the environment that like people are in as things are being said, it will lead to different reactions and different consequences. But yeah, no, I think social media has definitely allowed people to become super comfortable. You can sit behind a burner account and comment whatever you want. And then, oh, you got banned off that account? I'll just make another one. Unless you say something that will be threatening to someone's life to the point where like police have to track you down for it, there's no actual consequence to saying anything on the internet so long as you don't reveal who you are.
So we covered, the stereotypes against one another or feeling like we need to divide against one another. But do you all think that there are other or aspects of the African American or the African or just the general diaspora that need to
Yeah.
be addressed or that need to be moved away from?
I won't say like we as a whole, but there's definitely some people that are just way too lenient to
Yeah.
racism. stuff like that that might
Mm,
occur around them. There's times where, like, say, there'll be the token black guy or token black person in the group of just a bunch of white friends, and then the white friends will say something that's definitely out of pocket, definitely shouldn't say, and the black friend just won't check them. They'll start laughing with them, and they'll start
yeah.
making that, like, the white people think that what they're saying is fine because, hey, this black person's laughing at it. Why doesn't every black person laugh? Why can't everyone be more like them? Even what they might be doing, even if they feel wronged about it, they're not going to say anything about it because at the end of the day, they're also trying to fit in now. There's just some people that, like, don't take enough of a stand against what their peers might be saying, which just leads to this ongoing cycle of, like, new racists coming into play thinking that what they're saying is fine when it's not.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely agree. I think that our leniency plays into the whole thing we were talking about earlier about comfort and like excessive comfort. Mark
Yeah.
brought up earlier the effect of like colorism on people, and that is something that even among Africans or even among African Americans, I think it affects everyone really. That is definitely an issue that the diaspora needs to work on. The light skin thing or the whatever
Oh,
social
like
media
the
trends.
2010s light skin versus dark skin
Yeah, I
era.
don't know. I've seen people get into genuine arguments, even though again we coat things in jokes and things might be labeled as humor. There are like serious issues behind it. So I think definitely as a people we need to work on the whole colorism aspect. Consolidating that perspective.
Yes, that 2010s era where it was like that was the hashtag, that was the thing that everyone was
Yeah.
talking. It was always so odd to me. But the thing with that's most interesting is that it does go all the way back. It goes all the way back from being in the house versus being in the field and all
Mm,
of those things and seeing, oh, one is ranked above the other. But I think also alongside that, because typically in media that was popular in the 90s, even up until the 2000s, you typically saw people with fairer skin representing African Americans. You never really saw darker skinned people unless they were portrayed in a negative light. And I don't know if that was necessarily on purpose or that's just how society acknowledged the differences between people. But because of that, that has led into the colorism thing. That's led into thinking, oh, this person is of more value or more attractive than this other person, or they're worth more because of this. And it happens on, like you said, in all ethnic groups. Unfortunately, colorism is something that is not unique to the African diaspora. But what's crazy is, like, going into the beauty supply store and seeing skin bleaching cream. I'm like, what in the world? Like, this is horrible that people feel the need to bleach their skin just to be perceived as more attractive or better. And I do agree with you. That is something that the African American definitely needs to work on.
Yeah, I'll say the place where you probably see the most colorism is definitely in the dating scene and whatnot. Friends that will literally say, like, just outright just say, yeah, I won't date anyone darker than me, or I won't date anyone that's this dark. There's a very large gray area that defines a type and that defines just being racist. There's a
Oh yeah.
Right.
very large.
Preach.
If you just say, yeah, I wouldn't date her because she's too dark, then that's just racist at that point. People have their preferences, and then when you call them out on their preferences, then they'll start to feel offended, and then they get defensive, and it's like, why can't I like what I like, et cetera, et cetera. There's times where it's like it's actually like a genuine issue. Or outside of just black people in general, like there's a huge stigma against Indians. Huge stigma against Indians. There's a lot of people that I've met that just outright say, yeah, I will not date an Indian. They have a lot of negative stereotypes against them, just as pretty much every race has negative stereotypes against them. But for whatever reason, they seem to get targeted almost more than anyone else. Because, like, there's beautiful people from every single race. There's no one, like, race where everyone is just like Hunchback of Notre Dame race.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I can understand having a preference, but, like, going back on the topic of social media, when one person pushes that agenda, then a lot of people start to formulate around that agenda. So then, even if someone has never actually dated someone like an Indian person or dated a black person, whatever, they have this kind of stigma built up in their head already saying, yeah, I would never date one because of what so and so said about their experience.
Yeah.
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 I definitely agree with that. I think especially being on like the African American woman side of things, the weirdest thing or like the weirdest comment that I'll get is like, "Oh, like you're pretty for a black girl," and I'd be like, "What? Like what does that even mean? Like what is that? Like that's just odd in all kinds of ways. It's almost like a backhanded comment. Like that's not a compliment at that point because now you're negatively portraying the rest of my race in both the male and female side of things because people of different, I guess, like lightness of skin are portrayed drastically different in the African American community. For example, like there's the negative stereotype about light skinned men being softer or being more feminine or being more empathetic or having more feelings and just like a negative stereotype, whereas like a darker African American man is considered more strong. Where and it literally it stems back to slavery. Like not to be that person that's like it all goes back, but it does.
You're not wrong.
Back to that because they were seen as stronger or able to do more things. And then on the female side, it's flipped. It's quite the opposite. And so I definitely agree in the dating scene as well that that is a large issue that is seen. There's something called like texturism between like different textures of hair, right? So for some reason within the African diaspora, there's also a preference for having looser textured hair. And there was a huge like natural hair movement in the 2010s. You know, everyone was going natural, no more relaxers, no more straighteners. It was full curly hair. But the only representation you really saw was mixed women or women who had looser curl textures being represented in the media or in advertisements, right? Which is unfortunate because then if you have a tighter hair texture, if you have a tighter coil in your hair and you go home and you try the same product, it's not going to look the same on you as it is on other people because there is that drastic difference there and because that is for some reason was the preference amongst social media and amongst advertising companies was to say, oh, these people with looser hair textures, this is what we're going to have them do and have them be the representatives of the natural hair community when there are so many different types of hair textures and so many beautiful arrays of that unfortunately just goes underrepresented.
What you have both been saying about the perceptions that people have towards dating, like that often are racist, are definitely true. Thinking that like just preference versus racism, right? And I think people tend to teeter that line when we bring in the discussion of culture, because I had good friends of mine who would like say, "Oh, I'm probably gonna end up with this type or this type, not because of necessary looks, but because your cultures are typically very similar." But it's a big difference between that and then seeing something wrong with being darker skin tone or seeing something wrong with being a lighter complexion. It can be overtly racist at times. So definitely.
When it comes to the culture thing as well because I do agree that sometimes you do want to date within your own culture because you want that relatability, you know, you want to be able to rest your shoulders, release stress, and when you come home you want to be able to just be yourself. You want to be able to do things without having to explain it to somebody else. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I do agree with you on that standpoint. If you have a preference because you want someone who you can relate to culturally, I think that's completely valid.
I did want to ask you, Mark. I know I'm like targeting you, just first guest episode, but like from the sports aspect of things, right? I didn't want to provide context to the viewers though. All three of us did go to the same high school, and Mark Anthony White was a name I think pretty much everyone in the school knows by this point because he's a star football player. But in that experience, I was gonna ask you, did you encounter any racial biases or things that might come up stereotypically within the football community or just in sports in general? And of course, Shana, you can speak to this too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common one was he's short and black, so he's definitely gonna be fast.
Mm.
I've gotten that a lot, which I mean, fair enough. I mean, it was true. I'll give him that. True, but there's one time. I think there was one time where like I genuinely encountered racism on the football field. One time.
Really?
And yeah, I had the ball and like I got tackled or whatever, and I was in a pile, right? I was at the bottom of the dog pile or whatever. And I heard someone say, "Yo, don't try that again." They called me the N-word, right? So I'm thinking, I'm like, all right, you know, football, trash talk, whatever. I get up from the pile, not a single black person in sight. I'm just like, whoa. Wasn't a single black guy in sight. It was one of the whitest teams that we played actually. Like on that team,
Wow.
one
Okay.
maybe two black people. And I'm just like, oof. well, damn. And I mean, can't really do anything about it because how I am, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm very violent. I'm not very confrontational at all. That's just one of those things. You just gotta like, especially how fast the game flows in football. You gotta take that on the chin. You can't really think about stuff like that. You think back on it, you're like, dang, that was messed up. Like nothing you can really do about it because in the heat of the moment, everything's happening so fast. You can't go and whine to the ref about, hey, he said this, because next thing you know, the whistle's gonna get blown. Next play is up. So I think those are my only real like times like I've experienced some kind of racial bias or something like that. People like a lot of time people just expect me to be good at sports because like I'm like a pretty athletic person, and then also because I'm black, that's a pretty common stereotype. He's black, he's gonna be good at anything that involves athletics. But like there's like basketball, I can't play basketball. I suck at basketball. But listen, times that people just assumed that I'd be like the next Kyrie Irving. I can't shoot. I can't shoot. So but other than that, I mean, not really. I didn't really experience a lot of kind of like racial bias or anything like that. I was fairly respected in what I did. At the end of the day, we're both playing the same sport. But you know, there's some people that are just like, whether you like it or not, they're just gonna be outright disrespectful just for the sake of doing it. It is what it is.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I used to swim, and anytime I would tell somebody that, it would be like the really like you swim, and
Oh,
obviously it's because of the stereotype that African Americans can't swim. I swam for years and over a decade of doing that. So whenever somebody was surprised by that, I was always surprised that they were surprised until I remembered, oh, like you have this stereotype that I should not be able to swim, which is
right.
unfortunate. But then obviously, when I started doing track, that was never a surprise. When I tell
It's
people
like,
I
oh, of
run a
course.
track, I was like, oh, okay, great, yeah. Like, what event do you do? It's never like, oh, really? Like, you run track? Like, it's kind of interesting to see the difference to how people react to doing those different kinds of sports.
I would say outside of sports, just as a whole, branching out and really exploring our own like interests and stuff, whether it's gaming, art, movies, whatever kind of media it is, just being able to explore that, be comfortable exploring that, because a lot of people will bust into this certain kind of like stereotype of what kind of things we like to do, what kind of games we like to play, what kind of music we like to listen
Right.
to.
Yeah.
So like it's just really refreshing to see more people nowadays really branching out into different aspects of certain types of media. That way the people that have felt singled out for so long or felt left out because hey, I like this, but all my friends don't like this, like knowing that there's someone else just like them that also shares that same.
Yeah. Do
No,
you
yeah.
guys feel like you have hobbies or things that you like to do that don't necessarily fit the
Yeah.
stereotype or that you feel isolated in?
Yeah, definitely. Music and writing, in my experience, and Mark hit on this as well in terms of art and the perception of art with, respect to racial groups. Playing like classical music on like the piano or something, or if you're learning some genre that doesn't fit the stereotype, people are like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like, how is that going?" Versus if I were to say, "Oh, I'm learning a jazz piece," and don't get me, I love jazz. I love jazz.
Yes.
But like, if I was learning like a jazz piece or something, people have this perception like, "Oh, of course that." Almost like subconscious grouping. You're saying, okay, there's a category that everyone should fit under, and black people belong here. And that ties into writing. I love to write like short stories, poems, and things like that. One of my favorite genres in literature is fantasy. I love fantasy genres, like wizards, magic. I like that. It's really
Yes.
cool. And I mean, black people typically aren't. When you think Lord of the Rings, you think like The Hobbit. The pushback that actually the Lord of the Rings community had for that Rings of Power TV show that came out. I love that show, but they had a black elf. They had a black elf, and people had problems with that. So it's like almost we as a people don't fit into the fantasy genre of writing or literature, or even I would say like sci-fi things like that. And to see that, you see black authors starting to write more of those stories. Maybe a black dude can be like the next Gandalf or something, right? And I would think that was really cool. I like seeing that. So yeah, definitely branching out, seeing the black community be involved in facets that they weren't considered able to be involved in or like just didn't fit, right? And so definitely those hobbies I have, they tend to be stereotyped often.
I definitely agree. I also love to read. I definitely agree with you on that standpoint. Thankfully, like you said, that there are more authors coming out who are writing fantasy novels and writing more fiction that has accurate representations of African American people. Actually, one of my like TTs on my godmother's, her sister has a whole series out that is fantasy, but it is rooted in African culture because they're from Sierra Leone. So it's extremely
Oh,
cool
okay.
to read that kind of thing to see, oh wow, you can merge these two seemingly different aspects of writing and literature into one that ends up being really like she was I think on New York Times bestsellers. Like it was
Oh, wow.
so nice to see that because a lot of people I think were looking for that.
At least now it's definitely a lot more normalized. But back when I first started watching anime, back I want to say in like 20 like 18, 2019, taboo. It was like because the anime kid stereotype was like the stinky, don't shower, like
Mm,
yada yada. And then like nowadays, anime in the black community is huge.
huge.
It is,
Absolutely
and
huge.
I'm so thankful for that. It is huge. Like how RDC is doing DreamCon now, where it's almost like it's dang near like an all black anime expo. That's like crazy. You would never have thought about that being a thing. Back when I first started watching, I had to keep it a secret. Like I had another black friend who kind of like slid some information underneath the table from me because he didn't let a lot of people know that he watched it either. But he was, and like, listen, you gotta try watching Naruto. And like at the time, I felt the same way as everybody else. I'm like, I don't want to be grouped in with all those like the stinky weird kids. Want my black friends to look at me differently because I'm doing things that those kids like. So then I started watching, and I can't even lie, I changed my life. I can't even lie.
Real.
I learned so many things. Like you think like, oh, it's just like a cartoon, it's just entertainment. Like there's so many like hard driven messages, whether it be like a shonen or a slice of life or like something romantic, anything. There's so many things you can take out of it, and I really made me appreciate it for what it was. So then, I think when the great shift happened in like 2020, 2021, when everybody was cooped up at home and you just had to find something to watch, and everybody started watching anime, and it became a more acceptable thing. You started thinking like, see, now people understand what they were missing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like nowadays, it's so much more accepted. And I'm just so glad to see it.
Yeah. I think something I will say about that, my older brother actually could identify with that. He was always watching anime, and I will admit I made fun of him, like relentlessly. But then okay, but right, he made me watch Attack on Titan. That altered the direction of my life. That was
Yes.
brilliant, and I got into so many animes. I will definitely agree with that.
I can't lie, I also had the stereotype, but Mark
And who got you into it?
Mark got me into it. I think my first one was what, like Death Note. Death Note was the first one I watched all the way
Oh,
through.
Yup.
That was pretty fire. And I was
solid,
like, okay,
solid.
like, all right, what else you got? I was like, I'm like dipping my toes in the water. I'm like, okay,
Yup.
It's normal, obviously, to have your notions about others or different kind of subgroups and interests. But at the end of the day, I think just the overarching theme can just be keeping an open mind about people. Just because somebody is not what you think they should be doesn't make them any less valuable or any less of a person because they might be interested in stories or because they might be interested in anime or anything along those lines. They're still a normal human being. Like, it doesn't make them weird. It just means they have a different interest from you. So, yeah.
Exactly.
We talked about high school in our last episode. So, Mark Anthony, for you, how did you feel your high school experience was being a black person, specifically as like a Caribbean person, as it pertains to, like BSU versus like ASA, that kind of thing?
I'd say I had a fairly normal experience. Our school is pretty diverse. It's a pretty diverse
Yeah.
community, which I was pretty thankful for. Um, I never really did ASA because, I mean, to me, I'm not African. I'm
Right.
Caribbean. ASU had a more of a wider umbrella for people that like came from where my family comes from. When it comes to like any kind of like stereotyping and stuff like that, the only one I really got was like during like track season, where like, because I started repping my Jamaican flag sleeve. I've got it right here or whatever. I'd start repping it, and then like people would say, "Oh, no wonder he's fast. Like it's because he's Jamaican, right?" And so
Mm.
then, while it's kind of like haha, funny, funny, like Usain Bolt, like whatever. It also kind of discredits like the work that I put in to actually get this fast. Because yeah, obviously track is a lot of genetics. Obviously, there's some people that they're born to be fast, but they're not born fast. Like, you still have to work to get there.
That's actually a good question, though. We talked about a lot of negative stereotypes, but how do you feel about, or do you feel as though there are positive stereotypes towards Black people? And how do you feel about those? Because obviously, a lot of other people of color have different stereotypes about them. You know, you have the model minority myth. So I was just wondering, what do you guys think about that?
I will say, in terms of positive stereotypes among the Black community, I think you hit on the head with sports. That's a huge stereotype. All Black people are like, super athletic or super good at basketball or whatever. And if you end up fitting, quote unquote, the stereotype, like what Mark was saying, that ability to take it on one hand and be like, okay, I fit the stereotype, but I got here because of my ethic, my determination, my resilience. I practice, I put in the work, and I am this good now. I think being able to reconcile both of those things is very important in the Black community, or no matter what community you are a part of, because at the end of the day, it's not like you see a positive stereotype that like, oh, you should be super smart because of this, and then just decide to be like super dumb. No one no one does that, right? It's a matter of taking people's societal perceptions of you and still choosing to be the best and still doing this. So I think if you're taking it in the reverse direction of like, oh, this is a positive stereotype, it still can be annoying. I think we should still push back on it, even if it's the connotation is positive or whatever. But that doesn't mean you attack it by doing the inverse of what the stereotype says. It's just keep being yourself. We're all human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say like add on to that, the content of the stereotype, even though it might be positive, not very often is it used in a positive manner. A lot of people, like, for in competition, no matter if it's academia or it's through athletics, a lot of people use that positive stereotype as an excuse for why someone beat them at something. Like, say you're doing like a math contest and you happen to lose to an Asian person. A lot of people say, "Oh, of course he beat me. It's because he's Asian." Or it's like you're playing basketball and a Black person beats you. It's like, "Oh, of course he beat me. It's because he's Black." Like, from a denotative perspective, you can say, "Oh yeah, they're Asian, so they're gonna be super smart." You can say, "Oh, that's a good thing." But when you start weaponizing it to like bring down the work that someone might have like put into beating you, then it becomes like a whole different conversation.
Whole
That's when
different.
the
Yeah.
lines get blurred.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, one thing that is like obviously you have like the angry Black woman stereotype, unfortunately, and that's something that I've had to definitely avoid, especially in academic spaces the most because you don't want to fit into that stereotype. But I've had to navigate it in a way where I can still be outspoken without necessarily
Mm.
being seen as like the aggressive Black woman. Like I can still be a mover and shaker in spaces, still be able to take up space. Even if in someone else's mind they might see, oh, she is fitting the stereotype, I know that I'm being true to myself at the end of the day, and I'm still working towards this common goal or having my voice and opinions heard because I know a lot of the time I am the only one in the room. So, for example, like when I do a lot of my advocacy work, I'm the only one in the room who is a part of our racial group. That's just so happens to be how it is. And so with that, I can either sit back and say, oh, I don't want to be seen as the aggressive Black one, so I'm going to sit back and be quiet. Or I can take it and say, I'm going to take this stereotype and transform it into something positive and transform it into being, I'm going to be more outspoken. I'm going to speak because this person is probably not used to seeing African Americans in this light or in this type of setting. And so I do have to serve as that representation, unfortunately, in the sense that there to this day there still aren't a lot of us in those kinds of spaces. But positively on the side where it's like, okay, I can be myself and I know that I am doing a service to my community.
What you said about people literally not having seen Black people in that light, in that maybe professional setting. Do you guys think that the perception of the Black community in like these stereotypes and whatever is necessarily due to racism, or is it like predominantly ignorance, right? And I know people like to differentiate between the two, and most likely there's going to be an episode later about this, but ignorance definitely plays a role, and I think it's predominant in a lot of situations where people could have literally just have not seen Black people in these spaces yet. I also think on the flip side, it gets to a point where if you start dismissing ignorance too much, if we're gonna draw a line, that ties back to what Mark was saying earlier about leniency, and like at what point do we separate the two?
I would say ignorance is a natural thing that all humans have. If you don't know something, then you just don't know something. So, like, for instance, in the workplace, if like someone has never seen a black person in the position that they're in, then obviously they're going to be ignorant about what that person might be capable of doing. However, racism is taught, and racism is learned through either peers, experience, whatever it may be. So once that ignorance starts becoming discriminatory, like it's less
Mm.
of a, oh, I didn't know that, and then it becomes a, oh, you shouldn't do that. Why are you here? So that's like that shift between like ignorance and race.
I definitely agree with that. Where I think that we are in a time where we have to stop allowing people to be as ignorant, because in 2025 I feel like there's no reason that you should be using racial slurs. Like, there's no excuse for that at this point. Dang near everybody knows any type of racial slur, whether it be towards any community, should not be used, because you know that there's hurt behind that word. Having it under the guise of, oh, I was ignorant or I can learn from this, I think people have started to weaponize that in a sense, and being like, oh, I didn't know, but you definitely did, or you definitely had some inkling of that, oh, this was wrong and I should not have done that, or else you wouldn't be apologizing for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, to share an experience related to that, my junior year, I was the marching band section leader, and we were, preparing for one of the football games that we had like Friday or something. My section was all non-black people, and I was section leader, and I remember teaching some maneuver or something. And I'm not gonna name names, obviously, but they said like, "What do you think about the movie N Words in Space?" Right? He looked at me like dead in the eye. I thought, okay, must have misheard, right? Like, this must be. It was in the middle of me teaching something. He like said it again. What do you think about the movie? And then I had to remove myself from the situation, because I'm not super duper confrontational, especially in a setting where I'm trying to put on like, okay, look, I'm gonna try to be a leader. I'm doing this, build the resume up, whatever. And so I'm not gonna lash out. No, I wanted to in that moment. So I remove myself from the situation, and it's like their face shifted. They were like, oh my goodness, like I did something wrong. And there were two things that surprised me about that, because one, it's like they were playing it off as ignorance, or like, I didn't know that would be offensive to you. And two, it's like they want to pretend it never happened. Like, okay, well, it was obviously a joke. Like, why are you taking it like this? Why are you saying it in the first place? It wasn't just, oh, what's your favorite movie, or have you seen this movie? There's a reason you decided to say that word, and there's a reason you asked me that specifically. And I think that testifies to your point as to when we should stop dismissing this ignorance. Because even if part of that confrontation I had was racist and part of it was ignorance, like, okay, I want to see how he reacts because I've never been around a black person before, like just trying the waters. There's a point, like, you're testing the waters whenever you say that phrase. Like, if there should even be like a thought in your mind that says maybe I shouldn't say this, or maybe I shouldn't continue with what I'm about to do, I feel like that immediately takes away the, oh, he just didn't know card,
I'd say one like last thing that kind of pertains to this topic is like, almost like language barrier per se, if you want to call it like that. Because my grandparents, obviously, they're from Jamaica, like they're gonna speak patois, right? My parents, they'll speak it around the house occasionally. If mainly when they're like ordering me to do something like that, they'll say it, or they'll speak it around the house. But my grandma lives with us. She speaks with it 24/7. There are just certain times where like, not only like the words that she says, like they will be a little bit different, but the way that she says it and like tone and stuff like that, where it'd be normal how it is in Jamaica, it comes off a little bit differently here.
Mm.
There'll be times where like she'll say something and you can't tell if she's offended or not. You can't tell, like, you can't really read how she's feeling about when she says certain things. Since I've lived with her for a while now, I haven't really had trouble like understanding her. Like, I'm used to her now. My grandfather, on the other hand, it is like putting puzzle pieces together when he talks. Because even my parents say sometimes they don't even know what he's saying. He speaks patois, but he speaks it so fast, and sometimes he has a little bit of a stutter with it. So you really, it's like you gotta find certain words that are familiar, and you gotta like context clue, glue the words together. It's almost like ad libbing, trying to figure out what. words were when you have to do that over the phone and the phone starts cutting out a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
So it's got, he'll say like a whole spiel and you're like,
Mm.
no idea what he said. I think that's probably my last thing that I have to like add on when it comes to like diaspora and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, thank you, Mark, for joining us today in our conversation about diaspora wars. It was a very informative conversation, hopefully, that a lot of people can take a lot from.
Nah, of course. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here. Who knows? Maybe I'll be back. Stay tuned. Keep watching.
Yeah. Stay tuned, everybody. Thank you for watching this episode of The Ivory Tower.
Remember to follow us on all of our social media pages and always stay true to yourself both in and out of the classroom.
Peace out.